February 28, 2026 is already being described by diplomats and historians as a defining moment in modern Middle Eastern history. A night when long-simmering tensions erupted into an event of extraordinary consequence. In the early hours before dawn, a coordinated campaign of airstrikes carried out by the United States and Israel struck deep inside Iranian territory, targeting not only strategic military installations, but also the most heavily guarded residents in the country, the fortified compound of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. By sunrise, confirmation began to circulate that the 86-year-old cleric, who had presided over the Islamic Republic since 1989, had been killed in the bombardment. His death, abrupt and violent, marked the end of nearly 4 decades during which he had exercised ultimate authority over Iran's political institutions, armed forces, and ideological direction. The implications were immediate and profound, creating an unprecedented power vacuum at the apex of the Iranian state and setting in motion a cascade of regional repercussions that continue to unfold. The military operation itself was unprecedented in scale, according to multiple official accounts. Aircraft and long-range munitions traversed the skies above 24 Iranian provinces in a synchronized assault that extended far beyond the limited strikes seen in previous confrontations. Unlike earlier operations focused narrowly on nuclear infrastructure, this campaign was designed to decapitate the leadership structure of the Islamic Republic. The principal objective was the supreme leader's residence in central Tehran, a compound believed to be among the most secure sites in the country, shielded by layers of air defenses and internal security forces. Precision-guided munitions reportedly struck the compound repeatedly, reducing significant portions of it to rubble. Initial news of the outcome did not come from Iranian broadcasters, which appeared temporarily paralyzed amid confusion and disrupted communications, but from Washington, where U.S. President Donald Trump addressed the public to announce that the Iranian leader had been eliminated. He described the operation as the culmination of months of intelligence gathering and characterized the strike as a turning point that, in his words, might open a path for political transformation within Iran. Several hours later, authorities in Tehran confirmed the death through an official statement issued by the Supreme National Security Council and carried by state television. The announcement declared 40 days of national mourning, consistent with Shiite tradition. The statement emphasized the supreme leader's role as the nation's highest spiritual and political authority and framed his death as martyrdom in the face of foreign aggression. The loss extended beyond the figure of Khamenei himself. Reports from Iranian media outlets with close ties to the security establishment indicated that members of his immediate family were also killed when the compound was struck, including a daughter, a son-in-law, and a granddaughter. In addition, several senior military officials perished in the wider wave of attacks, among them General Mohammad Pakpour, a prominent commander associated with the ground forces of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The elimination of these figures compounded the shock to Iran's command structure, leaving key branches of the security apparatus abruptly leaderless at a moment of extreme vulnerability. Civilian casualties further deepened the gravity of the crisis. The Iranian Red Crescent reported that more than 200 people were killed and hundreds more injured across multiple provinces during the coordinated strikes. Particularly distressing were accounts from the southeastern city of Minab, where an explosion damaged an elementary school, resulting in substantial loss of life. Images from the aftermath circulated rapidly online, amplifying domestic anger and grief. In Mashhad, Khamenei's birthplace and a major religious center, large crowds assembled near the Imam Reza shrine, mourning the leader whose tenure had spanned generations. Black banners and portraits filled the square as clerics delivered speeches denouncing the foreign assault. Yet the response within Iran was not uniform. In parts of Tehran and other urban centers, reports emerged of small gatherings that interpreted the supreme leader's death differently. Viewing it as the fall of a figure long associated with repression, observers noted that Iran in recent years had experienced waves of unrest, including severe crackdowns on demonstrations that authorities acknowledged had resulted in thousands of deaths, while external assessments suggested even higher figures. The country's internal divisions laid bare by these contrasting reactions underscored the complexity of the political landscape now confronting any would-be successor. The question of succession loomed immediately. Under Iran's constitution, the Assembly of Experts, an 88-member clerical body, holds the authority to appoint a new supreme leader. However, The sudden and violent nature of the incumbent's death created uncertainty about whether established procedures would be followed or overtaken by events. In the interim, governance was said to be entrusted to a transitional arrangement involving President Masoud Pezeshkian, the head of the judiciary, and a senior cleric designated by the Guardian Council. Yet many analysts express concern that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, whose influence has steadily expanded over the past decades, might leverage the chaos to consolidate direct control. The guards oversee not only significant military assets, but also extensive economic enterprises, granting them formidable leverage in times of instability. A scenario in which the Islamic Republic evolves into a more overtly military-dominated system, rather than the clerically centered structure envisioned in 1979, suddenly appeared plausible. Tehran's response to the strikes was swift. Within hours, Iranian forces launched a barrage of ballistic missiles toward Israeli territory, marking one of the most direct confrontations between the two states in recent memory. Air defense systems intercepted many of the incoming projectiles, but at least one missile penetrated and struck a building in Tel Aviv, causing casualties and structural damage. Emergency services reported fatalities and dozens of injuries, while footage showed smoke rising from the impact site. The confrontation did not remain confined to Israel. Iranian missiles and drones were also directed toward targets linked to American and allied interests in the Gulf region. The United Arab Emirates reported intercepting a significant portion of the projectiles aimed at its territory. Incidents in Dubai resulted in injuries and fires at prominent sites, including hotels that serve as international landmarks. The expansion of hostilities signaled Tehran's intent to frame the confrontation as a broader regional struggle, rather than a bilateral exchange. Beyond the immediate military exchanges, the geopolitical ramifications were profound. Governments across Europe and Asia convened emergency meetings to assess the implications for energy markets and regional stability. The Persian Gulf, through which a substantial share of global oil shipments transit, became an arena of heightened anxiety. Insurance rates for commercial shipping spiked, and several carriers temporarily rerouted vessels. Financial markets reacted sharply, reflecting fears that a prolonged conflict could disrupt supplies and trigger wider economic consequences. Meanwhile, in Iraq, demonstrators gathered near the heavily fortified Green Zone in Baghdad, expressing outrage over the killing of Iran's leader and clashing with local security forces. The incident underscored how interconnected regional actors are with Tehran and how quickly tensions can spill across borders. For Washington and Jerusalem, the strategic calculus behind the operation appeared rooted in the belief that removing the supreme leader could weaken the ideological cohesion of the Islamic Republic and potentially accelerate internal change. Supporters of the strike argued that Khamenei had been the central pillar of the regime's continuity, guiding its policies through war, sanctions, and domestic unrest. Critics, however, warned that decapitating leadership structures can yield unpredictable outcomes, particularly in systems where power is distributed among competing factions. The risk of miscalculation, they noted, increases when communication channels are strained and retaliatory pressures mount. American military officials indicated that additional operations targeting nuclear infrastructure remained possible, suggesting that the campaign might not end with the initial wave of strikes. Inside Iran, the atmosphere combined mourning, anger, uncertainty, and anticipation. State media emphasized unity and resistance, portraying the country as the victim of unprovoked aggression. At the same time, ordinary citizens faced practical concerns, disrupted communications, sporadic power outages, and fears of further escalation. Universities suspended classes, and businesses in several cities closed temporarily. The funeral arrangements for Khamenei were expected to draw large crowds, but security considerations complicated planning. International observers debated whether the supreme leader's death might embolden reformist elements or instead harden the resolve of hardline factions. Much depended on how quickly a successor could be chosen and whether the transition would proceed smoothly or fracture under pressure. The broader architecture of Middle Eastern politics, already strained by rivalries and proxy conflicts, appeared to shift overnight. Alliances were reassessed, and diplomatic channels buzzed with urgent consultations. Some regional states sought to mediate, fearing that an uncontrolled spiral could engulf them. Others prepared contingency plans for defense and humanitarian response. The balance of deterrence that had prevailed, however uneasily, for years seemed fundamentally altered. With one decisive strike, a central figure of Iran's post-revolutionary era was removed, and the equilibrium that had developed around his leadership dissolved. As the dust settled over Tehran's damaged skyline, and air defense systems across the region remained on high alert, it became evident that the events of February 28th would reverberate far beyond a single night of air raids. The death of Ali Khamenei closed a chapter in Iran's history, but opened another fraught with uncertainty. Whether the outcome will be a reconfiguration of power within the Islamic Republic, a prolonged regional confrontation, or an unforeseen pathway toward de-escalation remains unclear. What is certain is that the shock of this operation has redrawn political calculations across capitals worldwide. In a region where history often turns on abrupt and dramatic episodes, this moment stands as one of the most consequential, its ultimate legacy yet to be written.